So I'll just briefly introduce myself. My name is Reham Sharbaji. I'm a translator and artist, and I am based in Amman. I studied in Pakistan, so I also feel like Lahore is home for me, but yeah, I'm a citizen of the world. I'm a bit nervous, that's why I'm sitting down. So I want to tell you about a program called the Spring Sessions. I'm not officially a member of that program, but I am a close friend and supporter and a continuous participant in the program. But before I tell you about the Spring Sessions, to give you a little bit of context about the city of Amman, I want to tell you a brief history of the city of Amman. So, although it has a very ancient past, there's ruins that go back to the Neolithic era. It has not been a continuously lived-in city. Up until 1906, it was a tiny village. There was 5,000 Circassians living there, and virtually no one spoke Arabic. In 1909, this map was made. The area was ruled by the Ottoman Turks, and so, as you can see, there's nothing called Jordan here. And if we close up to the map, we can see many cities that I'm sure most of you are familiar with, like Damascus, Jerusalem. There's Jerash, Asalt. Amman is supposed to be somewhere here, where my pointer is, but it was not significant enough at that time. It was still a tiny village until the Ottomans decided to build the Hijaz Railway, which connected Damascus from up here in Syria to Medina. To Medina to cater to the pilgrimage, the Muslim pilgrimage, and that's when Amman became a commercial hub. So in 1921, after the Great Arab Revolution, this young chap here, you can see on the right, is Prince Abdullah, or later became King Abdullah I, and next to him is T.E. Lawrence, most famously known as Lawrence of Arabia. They were really good friends, and they were the masterminds behind the creation of the Emirate of Transjordan. So this is the map of the place at that time. Present-day Jordan is a bit smaller than that. As you can see now, Amman is on the map. And many immigrants started to move to this new commercial hub, mostly from Damascus in the north and from a city called Nablus in neighboring Palestine. This is Amman in 1921. Here is the Roman Amphitheater. As you can see, there's not much around it. This was the center of the city, and this was basically it at that time. We jumped to 2000-something. It's full of buildings, full of people, most of them immigrants. There were no native people of this city until recent times. This is the present map of Jordan. And just to give some context, if you look at Jordanian culture, if you ask Google, it will show you a predominantly Bedouin, nomadic-looking culture. But that is very far from the truth. There are many, many ethnic and religious minorities that live in Amman. Circassians, Turkmens, Chechens, Armenians, and then religious minorities of Druze and Christians. Native Jordanians are also a minority in Jordan, but the country doesn't officially release those numbers. The majority of the citizens of Jordan are Palestinian refugees and their offspring. But they are also, there was an influx in 1948 and then another influx in 67 of Palestinian refugees, and according to time and place where they came from in Palestine, they are treated in different ways. It's very, very complex. East Bank Jordanians refers to people who came to Jordan in the 20s and 30s. So these people have nationality Jordanian nationality because they also had money. They basically built the city of Amman. It's very complex. You may be like, what the hell is going on here? But if you think about it and you look closely, you will see that the king of Jordan, King Abdullah II, the present-day king, is also a bit, I mean, he sometimes appears in his traditional attire because he descends from Hijaz, which is in present-day Saudi Arabia. So he does appear in his traditional attire, but he's also confused about his identity, just like the city of Amman. This is for real. He's a big Trekkie fan, and he's also a badass military ruler, so he's a pretty cool guy. I've never met him, but I think he's cool. Anyway, so bringing this whole point home, I guess, what I'm trying to show is that Amman is a very, very young city. It's infantile. And currently in Jordan, there's only 2 institutions that offer art degrees, and both of which are very, very traditional. The political situation is, it overshadows personal identities because there is a political identity. There is this identity, where have you come from? If you get into a taxi in Jordan, the first question the taxi driver will ask you is, where are you from? If you say Amman, he'll be like, no, really, where are you from? So everyone has come from somewhere else, and artists already question identity, so it's an added level. And so these are the key issues here, as you can read. I think I said most of them. There aren't many local opportunities for emerging artists to develop in a critical manner. And so 2 young ladies from Amman, Tulin Touk and Noura Al-Khassawneh, who are the co-directors, co-founders of the Spring Sessions, which I will be shortly telling you about, they decided to do something about it. So they sat down and tried to think of an alternative to the current art education that is non-traditional, non-instructional, experiential, open, flexible, a pedagogy that is open to people who are not of a certain type. Basically a playground, and they're 2 very playful people. This picture is from the last exhibition we had for the Spring Sessions. So they came up with the Spring Sessions, and it was the people in this picture are the participants in the first edition, which was in 2004. As you can see, people are lying down. It's just a bunch of friends trying to create art and culture in Amman. It was a very exciting program the first time it came around, so we invited people from a lot of places. There was around 7 artists, architects, and speakers who gave us workshops. So I'll just go through that. They're going to be random over different years. This program happens every spring for 3 months, so 100 days in the spring, where the participants come to the space every, I think 4 days a week, and participate in different workshops that are led by slightly more experienced artists. There's an open call. It's open to anyone. You don't have to come from an artistic background, but you need to have an open mind and a willingness to create, to connect with others and with yourself. So around 15 to maximum 20 people are accepted in the program as participants. And as I was saying, different artists come. The artists present new ways of art making, new ways of looking at the world, new ways of understanding culture, art. What is it really, and should it be reserved for a certain type of people, or is it for everyone? So many collaborative projects come out of this. Collaboration is a very key aspect to the Spring Sessions. Roles are merged, people end up collaborating with the artists, the visiting artists, with the facilitators. There's no hierarchy. Everybody has a say, who has something to say, can say it, and it can be done. This was the exhibition of the last spring sessions. And this was the year before that. Every year it moves to a different space. So it didn't begin with a permanent place. These are the facilitators. Again, they just hang out. Everyone just hangs out at the space. Rooftops are very important. This was the first space we had at the King Ghazi Hotel. I'll tell you about it shortly. And so it's also about people's experience with the city, people's relationship with the city. Amman is a very understudied place, and people kind of sort of battle with it. Do I love it? Do I hate it? And vice versa. So the spring sessions really focuses on experiencing the city and being aware of these experiences through the different workshops. So the artists that are invited, the criteria for inviting artists to give workshops, first of all, they're not always artists. It could be cultural practitioners, architects, social experimenters. The key criteria is that those people must be interested in working with other people, whether it's an audience or another artist, or with younger people. Their practice needs to be not public in that sense, but shared. A person who is willing to share, willing to collaborate, willing to be open and really embed themselves, not for artistic or cultural tourism, but to really come in and embed themselves and get on one-on-one relationship with everyone who's there and create work. The artists can be from anywhere. If we find their work interesting, we'll try to get in touch with them. We'll try to get funded. Funding is usually done locally because it caters to people who live in Amman as participants. But we've had participants coming in there was a participant from France, from Belgium, from Turkey. There was a participant from Iraq who didn't get a visa, so he didn't show up. But this last year, and artists also can be from anywhere. There is no kind of, it's just that funding can be an issue. So some people offer to pay their own tickets. That's great, that's really cool. So the first place where the spring sessions took place is the historic King Ghazi Hotel. This is a picture of downtown Amman in 1948, just 2 years after Jordan became independent from the British rule. Yeah, it's the first real hotel that opened its doors to outsiders to come and sleep. It's kind of like a townhouse. There used to be stables underneath and the house upstairs, and they would rent extra rooms to guests. This is what it looks like today, or in 2014. These are the balconies of it. Oops, I looked at my window. Yeah. So here are the balconies. It's a really huge space. It used to be a hotel for very long, but due to high rents, it stopped being a hotel, and it was just empty and getting full of weird stickers and strange things, and people would just store stuff in it. But it was a really interesting space with a really nice spirit also. Many people stayed there in the past, known people. So the girls from the spring sessions met up with these recent architecture students, recent graduates of the architecture school in Amman, and they designed the space in such a way that it's to renovate it in the most efficient and least costly way, because the owner of the building agreed to give us the space for 3 months, actually till the end of the year, in return of just fixing it up. Sort of like the previous, not the previous talk, the talk before. So it's not really, I mean, not really the same thing, but the idea is that there is this exchange and trust. So they fixed it up, started getting it ready for the first session, which was very exciting. As I said, it was very chaotic. We had the first workshop with a Palestinian artist who grew up in Lebanon called Ra'id Ibrahim. His back is to the photograph. And it was talking, because there's so much politics in the area, and so many people expect artists to be political, so we were questioning that and discussing and looking at things. Mapping sort of turned out to be something really interesting. There was an architect and urban planner from Cairo called Omar Nagati, and he's the founder of a space called Cluster in Cairo. I think it stands for, it's an urban planning / learning studio in Cairo. So he took us for walks around the city, looking at liminal spaces. So we kind of mapped whatever we thought was interesting. Some of the participants came up with a timeline about one particular spot called the Jamal Abdel Nasser Square, or Ministry of Interior Square, where there was a huge protest which people, close to the Arab Spring that was happening in Egypt, and people got inspired in Jordan and went there to that place. There's pictures of how it changed. Now the city has sort of made fountains and things where you can't really gather people anymore. So, I mean, they beautified it, but no more gatherings. Food was a very major part of the spring sessions, or any kind of meeting we ever had. There always must be something to eat. People who like to cook were invited to cook once a week, once every couple of weeks. We ended up with an open day at the end of the first edition of Spring Sessions. There was a string quartet playing from the balcony in the middle of downtown, which absolutely doesn't see things like that. Everyone was happy, people were dancing. One day, an interesting project that happened at in this place, downtown Amman. Now, downtown Amman is full of shops, businesses. People go to buy things, people go to work. It's not very cultural or artistic. There's an old mosque where people pray on Fridays and gather. So because people come to pray to the mosque on Fridays, vendors also they spread things and sell them. It's illegal to do that. So some people were sitting in the space, and somebody came up and brought a watermelon. One of the vendors, actually, he knew that there was these strange artists living up there, so he just brought a watermelon. And they started talking, and it turned out that these vendors were going to have a protest. So at that time, there was a workshop happening with an artist and photographer called Eric Gottsman from New York. And spontaneously, they decided to create posters for the protest. They told those guys, so we can make you posters if you want, we're artists. And they ended up making these banners. Now, in Arabic it says, صاحب قرار, صاحب بسطة, صاحب محل. صاحب, I guess, it could mean owner of, or a person who has. So the first one, the gray, it says qarar, which means decision, so a person with a decision maker. Red is sahib basta, which is a vendor, a street vendor. And the white is shop owner, or a person who works or owns a shop. So they made these 3 color codes. As you can see, some shops are closed, but there's lots of people going or coming from the prayer. What they then did is that they got hats in those 3 colors and started selling them, and asked people, buy the one you like, who do you support? Do you support the shop owners, do you support the vendors, or do you support the decision makers? many people bought the red ones, which were the vendors, but it was sort of an intervention which they didn't even intend to do. So I think that was a really cool project. The year after that, the spring sessions moved to another space in Amman, a printmaking studio called The Studio. Again, food was very important. I was not a participant of this year, so I was not involved in this year, so I don't have much to show you from it. But there were really interesting projects, again, mapping, as you can see in the background of this picture. But one really, really awesome workshop that they had was with an artist from Japan called Abake. And basically, they had a 48-hour walk. They had to walk around the city for 48 hours, looking for these little spots which were each participant's happy place in the city. So every participant put their happy place, and everybody would walk together around the city, going to those places. Participants put more than one, of course, and so they did that. They then went on to walk to Amman, and yeah, this is a picture of them. I don't know what they were doing, but they were just walking. And then the last spot on the map was too far, and they were all very, very tired. So what they decided to do is that each single participant took a taxi to that spot. Taxis in Jordan are not as expensive as they might be here in Europe, but still, it's a bit mad to do that, especially if it's a really long distance. But they just wanted to treat themselves, and that's what they did. And then this year, in 2016, the spring sessions found a permanent home. It was previously an art space for 12 years called Makan Art Space, which also had really amazing events and catered to emerging artists and catered to people who weren't really in the pretty art scene of Amman. So it's a really nice little place. There's room for residents. There's a blackboard for classes. People hang out, talk, cook, make interesting looking things, create art with food also. But also this year in 2016, there was another space. This year, every year the spring sessions is becoming more and more thought of, I guess. So there was a double space thing happening. The second space, apart from the permanent one, was a place called Culture Street. It's a street in a very busy part of the city, very close to the base. But it's all full of banks, so it's called Culture Street, and the city built it in a way. They made a little gallery here, but nothing is ever shown in it, and they really fixed it up, put marble on the floor, but nothing cultural happens there. So we had an artist from England called Babak Hashimi Mizad, and he conducted a workshop called Becoming Strangers. And it was questioning culture in public space, art in public space, and really kind of unlearning and separating yourself from things in order to understand them better. It was lots of fun. The participants, or we ended up making videos together, and we had a public screening. So as you can see up there, all these people who were just passing by, going to Burger King in the corner. I don't know if you can see it, but it was quite interesting to interact with the people of this neighborhood who were just working in shops and not really art, and especially conceptual kind of art is just not on their radar. So it was very, very interesting to have conversations and actually see that it's not really difficult for people to understand what we were doing. Then we had an exhibition, and we called it 100 Days of Art in the City. in the capital. It was coinciding with 100 years of the celebration of the Great Arab Revolution. And that's why we said 100 days of art in the capital. And then there was this simultaneously happening 100 years of independence from the Ottomans. Again, a map. The exhibition happened at Culture Street and our residency space and 3 other places around the city. We hired 2 coaster buses that are usually used for public transport with really bad music, and it was quite fun, but just to get everybody around, all the visitors. This was another space that had actually 1 artwork, but it was site specific, the rooftop. Okay, and now I just want to tell you a little bit about, have I gone way over time? I'm good? Okay. Okay, so I want to tell you a little bit about some people who joined Spring Sessions, not knowing why, but just wanting to be part of it, finding it really interesting, but kind of having this thing where, oh, I'm not really an artist. So this guy, his name is Hussam Dana. He's a photographer and graphic designer, but he refuses to call himself an artist. So his work, he participated last year in 2015. His work was mocking modern art. The text here, it's very unclear, I can't read it, but I remember what it said was basically he was mocking artistic gibberish, which sounds like gibberish to him, like it's just words and big words, and he was actually mocking it. But then he got so involved that this year he actually gave a mini photography workshop to the rest of the people who were interested. And him and this guy set up a dark room in the residency space. So he sort of became an integral part of the Spring Sessions. Another participant from last year, Yvonne Buchheim, she's German. She's based in Cairo, in Egypt. And she was a participant last year. This was her work. And this year she became a facilitator. She gave a workshop called Unthink Research, and it was throughout the 3 months. She would talk to us. She really brought in this whole art theory, art research, and questioning it as well, but just kind of exposing these people, or us, to it. As you can see, people don't look so happy because they had to read. The reading was really, some things were really, really difficult because also some of the participants were really young, for example, they were still in college, so they also found it very difficult. Other people were just not interested in getting so theoretical, but it was really good to have that side as well, to be exposed to that as well. Another participant is Razan, the girl sitting at the table. She is also one of the participants who felt that she's not an artist, she's not a creative person, she just likes to be around people and help people and talk to them and be an organizer. So she ended up making really interesting work. This was at Culture Street. What she did is that she put a flag of Jordan and a flag of the city of Amman, and she sat there on the desk, and anyone passing by, she'd be like, "Hey, I'm the manager of this street. If you have any issue, tell me." And it was hilarious. She was really good at it. Quite a performer. She made little videos of it. And then for her personal project at the end, she ended up making a mock political campaign that she was running for elections. And most of these real election posters look like this. They're very, really amazing Photoshop skills. What it says up there is that she's from some. It doesn't exist. The place where she's running does not exist. It says Sharq Gharb al-Asima, which means east-west of the capital. And Razan bake, the word bake comes from Turkish. It's a sign of respect. You can call someone blah blah bake, but usually it's for male. It's a male, it's like sir, in a way. But women use it sometimes to become a bit more masculine. And then under that it says mother of all, which kind of has a very, very bad connotation because people in the Middle East curse at each other's mothers. And if you do that, you'll get beaten up. So it's really funny, like, is she insulting everyone? Is she true? It was really, really interesting. Some people actually fell for it because there was elections recently, earlier this month, and someone saw it on Facebook, and there were all these comments. What is this woman doing? Does she have no respect? They thought she was really running for elections, which I find amazing. Like that happened. So she suddenly became an artist. And lastly, this was my work from 2004, the first year. We had a workshop with an artist called Reem Al-Qadi. She's Iraqi American, and she works with found objects, thrown away objects. She gathers things and creates stories around them. So we went on a walk around the city picking up garbage and trying to make sense of it, trying to create stories around it. And I somehow ended up with this, and I called it Costume of a Fighter from the Kitchen Gorillas. It had no meaning, it just came about like that. This piece burnt down with the space caught fire. And this year I was also a participant of the spring sessions, and I made a little video which is actually showing at the gallery here, so if you're interested, if you haven't seen it, please do. And the last thing I would like to tell you about the spring sessions is that we started out from King Ghazi Hotel. As I mentioned earlier, Amman is understudied. There's a sort of denial of it being home. So we, over the years, in 2004 we mapped this street. In 2015 it moved to a closed space called the Studio. They mapped the same street of the Studio. That was their crazy walk for 48 hours and the taxi ride. And then in 2016 we had 2 other spaces, and there was also a mapping or documenting of museums of Amman project. Amman has over 35 museums, and so we attempted to document it and create a website. It didn't happen, it was too ambitious. But it's an ongoing project. Spring Sessions is an ongoing project. There's no plans yet for next year's theme, but let's see what happens. But it's happening during spring, and that's it. Thank you.
This was quite a lot and very interesting. Thank you, lady.
Sorry.
Questions, so please, questions down.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And I was quite impressed that you said Amman is a young city, although Amman is rich in history.
Mm-hmm.
Dance history in a way.
Yeah.
I have 2 questions. First is, what's the expectation or role of art in Amman? You mentioned that searching for identity is a very important role, I think. But other than searching for identity, what do you expect, or what do people in art world think the role of art to apply in Amman?
Okay, well, people in the Levant, in Amman, whoever had studied art in the past, like older generations, they went to Iraq, to Damascus, to Cairo, to Beirut. These were cultural hubs, and they brought their education with them. There was a lot of, so art, or that kind of artistic practice is very traditional. So there is this expectation of skill, beauty, very traditional expectations of what art is. People sell really well. So there are some really expensive galleries. That does exist, but the younger people are starting to question that. It's meaningless. It's becoming meaningless, and the link with identity. It's not just about identity. Obviously, there's a lot of other things. Some people don't have those kind of ideas or questions about identity, but it was sort of a metaphor for a city that has multiple identities, yet has a very very unrealistic state narrative of what the identity of its people is. Most people in Amman are not Bedouins, are not from native. So there already is this sort of question that is there about identity. It is sort of an issue that exists for people who question things. So I don't know what Amman expects from art. I think people are bursting with creativity. There's a lot of potential. So I don't know what it expects, but I think it should expect a lot. Yeah.
Another question?
Yeah.
You said young people are questioning the traditional way for art. I'm wondering if there is some role model for you, for artists, for young artists in Amman, for their practice. Do they look more to the West, or are they trying to evolve by themselves?
I think I can't generalize. I mean, I can't generalize this because wherever you study art, it is you do study Western art schools, you do go through all of that development, and then you do study the local stuff. For example, when I studied in Pakistan, it was like that. In Jordan, I mean, everyone has their own thing. People are not very different from each other in that sense, I guess. So I don't think I can answer that. It's mixed. It could be anything. It could be local artists. It could be. I mean, there are many amazing artists from the region, but it's
very diverse.
Yeah, exactly. It's diverse.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
More questions?
Oh, I didn't see that. Yeah, sure.
Are there any tensions between the population groups in Amman?
Yeah. Yes.
So this could be a task for arts somehow too.
Yeah, they've tried to do things. I mean, people are. There are a lot of artivists in Jordan that make art about that. Yeah, it exists. Again, it comes down to identity. These conflicts or these sort of. It exists not everywhere, but yeah, artists also try to delve into that. There is no official sort of censorship, but I feel personally, looking at it, I feel there might be a little bit of self-censorship from artists, from some artists, just because of being scared of getting into trouble, I guess, yeah. So some people maybe seem to play it safe, but again, this is just my opinion. I can't really generalize it.
Thank you for your presentation, for the interesting project. It sounds amazing.
Thank you.
I'm wondering if you maybe could talk a little bit about funding, like how do you sustain yourself? I don't know if this is a part of what you would like to share.
No, of course, I'd like to tell you about the funding. The first year of the program, the founders went around to local foundations, local companies, local philanthropists. They wanted the funding to just be local. It is easy to get funding. It's not that easy, but I mean, it's possible to get funding from foreign institutions. There's the Goethe Institute, there's the French Cultural Center, these kind of things. There's other NGOs, but they wanted to make it a point to raise more awareness in the local community that there's this cool project that we want to do, and can you give us money? So most of the funding for the first year actually came from a lady who lives, a Jordanian woman who is very, very rich and loves giving her money to education, she just loves funding projects like this, loves funding things that are real and yeah. So it was easy the first year, it was very exciting. The second year also was mostly local, all local funding, and the third year, 2016, was also from different places being funded locally, but also we got a fund from the Goethe Institute. We needed more money and couldn't get it locally, so yeah. But every year it's different. I mean, it's a whole year process. One of the founders, she is always talking to different people, always trying to go back to some people and to see if they like what's going on and want to keep funding. So yeah, it's a bit hectic, but so far it got done. So hopefully more.
Thank you.